Hey everyone, welcome back to JP's Budget Collecting and our weekly look back at the hot comics from 6 months ago. This week we're looking back at the hot comics from February 19th, 2021, and I'm recording this on August 20th, 2021, just before I head out to a con this weekend. So wish me luck that I find some good deals. As always, we're looking back at the CBSI Hot Top 10 and the Comic Tom Key Collector Hottest Trending Comics of the Week. They each do a list of 10. Key Collector actually does 20, but Tom does 10. We focus on the 10 that make Tom's video, as well as the 10 on the CBSI list. This week there's 19 different books to talk about. And we look back at these books to try to understand what made them hot back then, what were the factors that were causing them to hit the list, that were causing people to chase them. What's happened to them since, so that we can see, which books are worth chasing, which books are worth being patient on, try to get an idea of what the patterns are in the market. Sometimes we get a good idea, sometimes books, are outliers, but we'll see. So without further ado, let's get into this week's list. We start off with covers. We didn't really have any option news this week. We had covers and Comic Buzz and MCU pretty much this week. So let's start with the covers. First up, we have Excalibur number 18, the Russell Donnerman 1 in 25 Every Rogue Ever cover. Back then at release, this was going for 40. Typically, if a 1 in 25 only gets to 40, it doesn't really do much. This one, however, has definitely bucked that trend. It's now a $125 to $175 book raw. Didn't really see any slab sales yet. So this was, I predicted them all be back, but this has been straight cash. People love Rogue. It makes you think that that Avengers Annual is maybe even still undervalued a little bit, as people are paying this much for this book. Next, we have Spider-Woman number 9, the Rose Besh 1 in 25. This was kind of her as an artist coming out party, I guess, and people really discovered who this artist was. She'd already done a couple of covers, I think, but this was the first prominent one that she did. This 1 in 25 was going for $120 to $180 at release. Now it's a $150, $175, so basically in that same range. 9.8 are going for $380 to $350. I thought this one might keep going a little bit just because of, being a new artist, her first major cover. It might creep up a little further. It did not. It's been pretty steady, been pretty worth it though, over at least these first 6 months since this book came out. Next, we have Star Wars The High Republic number 1, the Walmart 3-pack variant. This hit the stores, and it actually went crazy. Like, early, as it was first coming out, it was going for $60, $75 on eBay. By the time it actually hit the list at the end of that week, it was already back down to like a $20 to $35 book as more of them came out. And that's really where it stayed. It's a $15 to $30 book now. 9.8 will cost you $90 to $120. Cool cover, not my favorite of the High Republic covers, but definitely a good Yoda cover. I definitely like this cover, but it's basically been pretty steady, 15 to 30 down, maybe just a little bit from where it was before, but mostly steady. Next, our last cover of the week is Marvel number 5, the Adam Hughes 1 in 25 variant. An Adam Hughes cover that's not of a pretty lady that hits the list, which is kind of rare, it seems like. Back then, raw copies of this were going for $50. This was a pretty hard to find book. Not a ton of these orders, so not a ton of these 125s out there, but this one has still dropped back $15 to $30 now, and that's only with 4 sales. Just not a lot of them listed, but not a lot of sales either. Definitely been down and a bit of a trap dropping that much from $50 back when it first came out. Next up, we have 2 books that are kind of the 2 covers of the same book, 2 variations of the same book, and that is, first we have Taskmaster number 3, the A cover. This is the first appearance of Taguchi, a new South Korean hero that appears in this book. The 1 in 25 we'll talk about in a second hit the list last week, which we thought was mostly about cover, but it appears there's some buzz around this character as well. Back then it was going for $15 to $30 2 weeks after release. Now it's a $15, $25 book, so a bit of an I'll be back. Pretty steady all together, but 9.8s are running $75 to $100. So there's definitely still some interest in here, still some buzz that Marvel's going to go this way with some Asian characters, trying to get a little more of the Asian market, that we might see some Disney Plus appearances by some of these characters. This is a character people are specking on a little bit. And that brings us to the book that was on the list last week, Taskmaster #3, the Davis 1 in 25, with this sweet Black Widow cover that, well, a lot of people seem to really like this cover. There's something about it that just bothers me. It's a little off for me, but when we talked about it last week when it was on the list, it was a $60, $75 book at week of release, so not quite triple ratio. By this point, it was a $175 to $250 book. It had blowed up. It was huge. Now raw copies are still $200 to $300. I thought for sure this was a bit of a trap. I just didn't think this cover was that great. But the cover, along with its first appearance, seems to have kept this book moving. It is definitely up still from even that $175 to $250. Not a lot, but up a little bit. So this book has been straight cast. There's been spec on it. People like this cover, and this seem to be specking on this character. So that's continued to drive this book. Next, we are moving fully into comic buzz, and we got Black Cotton #1, which was kind of a hot indie of the week that came out from Scout. $15 basically at release. Now it's a $5 to $15 book, so cover to $15. This one's definitely turned into a bit of a I'll be back. I don't know much about the series. Never really heard much about it other than right when it was released, and I haven't heard much about it since, so don't know if this was not sustained. Maybe there was some ops and buzz around this, which is pretty typical about Scout, but they didn't mention it when they were talking about it back then on that week. Next, we got three pretty big books coming up next. First, we have Batman Adventures 12, first appearance of Harley Quinn in comics. Back then, they were talking about the 9.8s were hitting $3,000, which a year before they had been going for about $1,500. So this book had doubled in a year. That's why they put it on the list. And now raw copies are still $400 to $800. 9.8s are now $3,000 to $3,800. This is a straight cash book. This is a very popular character. She's not going anywhere. This book's going nowhere but up. I'm glad I got my copy. So there you go. Next we have Walking Dead #1. First Walking Dead, first Rick Grimes. But really it's just about the series as a whole than any individual character. At least for this first #1. 9.8s are going for $3,000 plus back then, which was jumped back up. That book had settled for a while with the end of the series, that kind of thing, but it was moving again, mostly due to the release of the deluxe version that was coming out, the full color deluxe version that was starting to come out. Now raw copies are going for $1,000 to $1,250. 9.8s are still sitting basically in that same range, $2,700 to $3,300 on recent sales for those. Still a straight cash book, though, overall. Steady. Do we think long-term? It'll be interesting to see how much interest Walking Dead can hold long-term. I know the show's still coming out, but will eventually this interest fade in this series? I kind of doubt it. My guess is, I don't know that there's a much higher ceiling for this, but I feel like it's probably always going to be a pretty valuable book, even as we move away from it, because the series does mean a lot to a lot of people. So I can't see it falling back too much. So next we have Spawn #174, the first appearance of Gunslinger Spawn, and this had to do with the announcement that we were finally we were kind of going to expand the Spawn universe. We were going to move, that Todd McFarlane announced that they were going to move beyond just the regular Spawn title, that there were going to be other Spawn series, including Gunslinger Spawn getting its own series. Back then, 9.8s were hitting $650 based on this news. Now raw copies are going for $400 to $600. 9.8s are $1,000 to $1,250. So this has definitely been a straight cash book. It's basically doubled. It was up then, and it's doubled in the last 6 months. Continuing, people love this version of Spawn. I don't know, I've never read Spawn. I'm guessing it's not just because he looks super cool, but I would say that has part of it to do with it. But I'm sure the stories are great too. But yeah, so this book has continued to just move. Next, we have House of Mystery #1, the first appearance of Cressida. I don't know exactly how you pronounce that, but basically this character was being kind of reintroduced in the Joker series, so that's what caused the buzz. It was going for $5 to $18 back then with a huge increase in sales. That's why Tom and them put it on the list. raw copies now are 5 to 10. 9.8 though only went for 25 plus shipping. So this is definitely down. Definitely an I'll be back. Not a ton of sustained interest here. This is not a character I see being around much, but we'll see. Maybe they'll change things. But so far, not a lot going on here. And our last comic buzz of the week could have probably been in the cover category also, but this is the Last Ronin #2. Finally got the Last Ronin #2 several months after 1 came out. This is the 1 in 10 Sophia Campbell variant. Back then, raw copies were going for 25 to 55, which is really good for 1 in 10. Now it's a $10 to $30 book. This has definitely become a bit of an I'll be back, definitely down. You could argue even a trap at those kind of rates, but there was a pretty wide spread when it was coming out before, or when it was on the list before. Only 2 recent 9.8 sales, one for $75, one for $160. So again, a pretty wide spread there. Cool cover. So far it's been a very popular series, but I don't know when we're getting issue 3 unless I just blinked and missed it, which is completely possible given the way things have been going for me lately. So, next we have Peter Parker, the Spectacular Spider-Man #98. This is the first appearance of the Spot. And basically, there was rumors that the Spot would play a role in the upcoming Spider-Verse 2 movie. Back then, raw copies were hitting 25, and 9.8 hit 280. Now, raw copies are 5 to 25. 9.8s are actually up. There's only been 2 recent sales, so they were both 450. So overall, like the vast majority of sales and movement on this book is of raw copies, and they are definitely down. Definitely an I'll be back on that front. I guess it's probably pretty hard to get a 9.8 in this book right now, or like there's not many of these on the census, and there's probably not a lot of copies that are truly 9.8s that are out there, which is why that 9.8 is continuing to creep up. But overall, the book is down. All right, let's see. We're moving. That was our first kind of not really MCU, but Sony Spider movie news. Now we're moving fully into the MCU. We got the New Avengers #7. First appearance of the Illuminati. This is still a lot of spec that this Illuminati group is going to appear at some point in the Marvel Universe, even though many of the characters haven't been introduced yet, and a couple of them are already, well, one of them is already like come and gone, so we'll see where that goes. Back then, raw copies were $20. A 9.8 was $140. Now it's a $5 to $25 book. 9.8's $150 to $225, so it's crept up again. Not very many sales of 9.8s, but the raw copies have crept down. So overall, it's kind of an I'll be back. So another book, just more Marvel spec. People think this might happen, but I think we're a long way from it happening. Next, we have Killmonger #1. And this was completely out of place on the list. I don't know why I put it here when I organized the list back in the spring, but I just kind of left it where I had it when I was doing Cash or Trash. This is the second print, and this is really should have been our covers because it was this cover was highlighted by CBSI in an article about cool covers, and raw copies jumped to $50 from 20ish to 30ish before. Now they're a $10 to $30 cover again. So it's back where it was before it got mentioned. So this was a little bit of somebody mentioned it, people chased it, and then now it's back to where it was before, which is still pretty decent for a second print, $20, $30 for a cover. 9.8 will run you about $150 plus. So definitely an I'll be back, or to trap on this one, just because, actually, I put it as trap because it's definitely less than half of what it was going for back then. So, next, we have New Avengers #40. This is the first appearance of Ranky. I think that's how you pronounce her name, the Skrull Queen. This hit the list because there's a lot of, we knew Secret Invasion, is coming to, kind of going to get a show. We've got casting. There was casting news and buzz about this. Later, we found out Emilia Clarke had been cast for a role. People were speculating that this was her, or the role she was potentially going to play. Back then, raw copies were 10 to 20. Now they're 10 to 30, so it's kind of crept a little bit up. Mostly been pretty steady, though. Definitely a worth it kind of book to this stage, and might be a book still worth it to chase down if you can find a good deal. Next, we have Doctor Strange #81. First appearance of Rentra. I don't know anything about this character, but there were rumors that this character would play a role in Doctor Strange in the Multiverse of Madness. seems like there's a lot of characters that are supposed to be in that movie. We'll see. Back then, raw copies were going for 15. Now they're 10 to 30. So this one's another one that's kind of crept a little bit up. I figured this would be an I'll be back. People will kind of forget about this, but not so far. It's definitely been worth it so far to have grabbed this book back then. Although you can still kind of get it for the same value. 2 books left. We got Fantastic Four, number 94, first appearance of Agatha Harkness. Obviously, we were still in the middle of WandaVision at this point, and Agatha was definitely on everyone's mind. Back then, a 7.5 hit a record of 330, and 94 hit a record of 900. Now this book has crept back down a little bit. Raw copies have cost you 25 to 90, depending on condition. Maybe higher on a really, really nice copy, but like for the most part, 25 to 90. 7.5 now is sitting about 250, so down just a little bit. Couldn't find a recent 9.4 sale. The most closest thing I could find was a 9.2 recently went for 500. So overall, it looks like it's a bit of an I'll be back, which is kind of what we expected. We've moved away from the show. We don't know when we're going to get Agatha again, although we expect we will. So it's just kind of falling back just a little bit from those peaks around the WandaVision show. Last book of the week is our one DC kind of related book. And this is Action Comics number 689. First appearance of Superman in the black suit. And this had everything to do with the Snyder Cut coming and that we knew we were going to get Superman in a black suit. I have a hard time putting this on the list. I know there was a huge number of sales. That's why they put it on this. It was still only going for $5 to $10. I kind of called it a come on man because I was just like, really? Anybody think this is going to amount to anything? And it didn't really. Raw copies now are $1 to $10. So still in that same kind of range. Down a little bit because there's not very many sales. Surprised 9.8 actually cost you 70 to 80. That seems a little higher, but there's not a ton of them like there is for some of those other books that are around this time. They're way overprinted like this. But so that is this week's list. We had 19 books. I want to thank you guys for watching. Now I got to get all my stuff organized and head to Planet Con in Kansas City. I'll try to drop some stuff on Instagram. I guess you guys won't see this until I'm doing that on Saturday, but I want to thank you guys for watching, and we'll catch you next time.